Welcome to my Roman kitchen. Today's recipe is one of my favourites. It's called a Libum, and it's a very simple honey cake that the Romans used, I think, as a delicate dinner sweet, but also as a sacrificial cake. And that means that they were made in bulk for people to buy, to put on the altar, to take to the temple, to offer as an offering to the gods. They didn't have to be particularly nice, but the delicate dinner sweet did. Now we get our recipe from Cato the Elder, the agricultural manual of Cato the Elder. It's a wonderful little recipe, and I want to read it to you first before I start. There's going to be notes on the website about these recipes, but it's number 75. Recipe for Libum. Pound 2 pounds of cheese thoroughly in a mortar. When it is thoroughly pounded, add 1 pound of wheat flour, or if you wish to make the cake more delicate, half a pound of fine flour. Mix thoroughly with the cheese. Add 1 egg. I'm always very doubtful about that 1 egg. There needs to be more eggs, I think. And work the whole well. Pat out a loaf, place on leaves, and bake slowly on a warm hearth under a crock. Sub testu is what it means, and this is a testum. These were found all over Italy. We don't find them in Britain, which is a great shame. But basically, as you can see, it looks like a hat. It's hollow inside. It's been sitting on this fire for an hour and 15 minutes so far, and it is sizzling hot. It is very hot, and I can't touch it anymore, which is great. The charcoals are nicely burnt underneath, and it's almost ready to go. So we will make our cake ready to bake. So we start with our cheese. It's probably sheep or goat, and it's full fat. Sometimes I use ricotta, but today I'm going to use mascarpone because it's really full fat and really rather nice. Ricotta, as I'm sure you know, is a second cheese, so it's quite low in fat. So it says pound it because it would also need to have its salt removed from it, but we don't need to do that because mascarpone is so sweet and fresh. So we're just going to beat it up a little. Now it says add the flour to the cheese and then the egg afterwards, and I think Cato's kind of got confused here. I am rather of the opinion that the egg goes in first and then you add the flour. So I argue with Cato in this respect. So we're going to add 1 egg. So that is 250 grams of cheese. Now the recipe of course says 2 pounds, so we're taking it down to 1/3 of the full recipe. Bearing in mind of course that a pound in Roman weights and measures is 12 ounces and not 16. So it works down rather nicely to 250 grams of flour. Now it should be half an egg by that recipe, but we're just going to be bold and add 1. And we beat them up together, because we're making a delicate dinner sweet. We're not making one for somebody to buy from the market stall to take to the temple to offer to the gods. We want something that we can serve to a luxurious dinner party. So we beat the two together. Until it's smooth. I'm going to clean off the cheese from the spoon. Now we know that some of these cakes were really quite ordinary, and I can imagine a large amount of old cheese and quite coarsely ground flour and only 1 egg, I suspect, were made in bulk. So it was a woman's job, I think, to make liber for people to buy, so that they could take it as an offering to the gods. It did not need actually to be eaten in any real sense, but sadly we do know that they were eaten. They had to be eaten because many slaves worked in the temple precincts, and according to Horace we get this glorious story in Horace of a slave who runs away, and he's chased around the city centre in Rome, and when he's caught he complains, I've been fed Libum. I've been fed old, stale Libum, and I really want some bread, please. And so this was his excuse for running away. And you can understand that it was probably not a nice diet. But we are making a delicate pudding, and it's going to resemble, in some respects, a souffle. I think it's quite close to a souffle. So we're smooth. Now we have quite a lot of egg to cheese in here. The ratio is quite high, higher than it should be in the recipe. So we need to add, by the recipe, this is an ounce and a half, 43 grams. So we're going to add that and see how we go. I've got more flour to add. It slowly binds in and becomes thicker. And we want to be quite delicate with it. So now I'm going to look for some more flour. So at this ratio now, we want probably the same amount of flour again. It'll get thicker in a moment. So I'll catch some more flour. So now I'm going to add it by the handful, just to bind it up. At some stage very soon I shall switch from spoon to hands. It's the only way to be sure. It's still quite soft, so we need another handful just to bind it up. We're getting there. Now it's quite soft, and if I held it in my hands, eventually it would drip through my fingers, but you would be able to hold it just long enough to transfer it, which is what we want, to transfer it to the hearth. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to put it directly on the bottom of that hearth, sitting on some bay leaves. And the bay leaves protect it as a cake from the ash, and from, there won't be any charcoal near it because it'll all be protected by the oven. So I'm just going to gather it up into a ball. A little more flour. It's a messy business. A little more flour, and I'm going to leave it while I prepare my oven. It's going to sit there and wait to go on the hearth. Okay, so the next stage is to handle the oven. Now, it's had, this little oven used to have its own special lid, but I lost it a long time ago, so I've been using a little face mask. But you need to cover the hole, but then it's also very useful to be able to smell when the cake is cooked and regulate the heat. So we take it off. Take it off very carefully. We take the trivet away, and the coals are just perfect for what I want. Everything is alight, everything is white. And make a hole in the coals the same size as the oven. I haven't got any of my protection on today, but we'll just, it's not too hot. So we are, with one of my cloths, going to get rid of some of the ash. It's not too dirty, but just, we don't want it really covered in ash, because the leaves will take on that ash too. So there we are. Hot. There we are. So we put the leaves down. Just so that when you put the cake down, it's got something to sit on, so it doesn't stick. So I'm going to get more flour around my fingers. I'm going to pull this out. It's a bit sticky there. We take a bit more flour there. Remember, we want something really delicate. And I pick it up and put it down. I think it's nice if it's got some crustiness, lumps on it, because they get crispy and it makes them extra nice. So I'm going to wipe my hands on my cloth, and then we need to worry about getting the oven back on just right so that it fits. There we are. Down it goes, level. And now, just like with our honey nut omelette recipe that we did last time, we put coals all around this wonderful flange, which is how it's designed to take. It's very much like a Dutch oven, as I'm sure many of you will recognise. Dutch ovens were made of metal, and they used to sit on the campfire, and they had a special lid that you could add coals to. And this is precisely the same principle. So it's going to get quite hot in there. We want it quite hot. It's going to rise like a souffle, which I want it to. It needs to have quite a decent heat, but it also needs to be sustained. It says cook it quite slowly. So the best bits of coal go on the top, and then you push the rest around the edges, and that sustains the heat without getting any ash on the cake. And the secret of a good Libum is to have a clean cake, no ash on it at all. Sometimes that happens, and if it's a very windy day, it's not easy, because the wind will blow the ash inside, whether you want it to or not. So this oven is extremely efficient for baking cakes, but also bread. Brilliant for bread. A sourdough loaf baked inside there has the most amazing crust, and it's partly because there's a very narrow gap of air around the bread, but also because the steam that escapes from the bread can't actually go any further. So the atmosphere is very moist, and the same applies to the cake, to be honest. So it cooks, and then it forms a wonderful crust. So at one stage, when we were experimenting with these ovens, I had a loaf of bread in there, and a thermometer, and a stool, and a torch, and we took a temperature reading every 10 minutes. And I got to about old money, because I prefer old money. It's about 450, which is about 220, I think, roughly. So a nice baking temperature, and I could have got it even hotter. So we wait for that wonderful smell of toasted cheese to come out, and then we take it out. So we pause.
Okay, tell us what you're thinking.
Okay, there's a lovely toasted smell coming out of the hole, and it's been in for about 25 minutes, so we're going to have a look. And I should imagine it's going to be set. I suspect it will be a little flatter than it should be. We will see. Way! Not bad. The toastiness is fabulous. It's cooked. It's spread more than I would like, but it's done. And we can cut the little bits of black around the outside. Because of those bay leaves, we can lift it off, and it's going to be wonderful to taste. So that has to be made stable.
Does smell great.
Does smell great. So coming round, and we will see whether we can release it. And that means getting a little there. God, that was quick and easy. Little bit of ash, always an issue, but we can clean it up. So we have our Roman cheesecake. Now, at this point, You cut it open into slices. You see the texture of it, and the smell.
Show me the edge. Nice.
The smell of the bay leaf coming through is quite glorious. And now the finishing touch is to smother it in honey. We hear from the poets that Libum were drenched in honey as a matter of course. Now Cato doesn't say that. His recipe, I think, is for a sacrificial cake, a true sacrificial cake, one that the farm would have needed in order to please the gods on a family basis, on their own personal altars. And so that's why the cake, I think, is so dry and coarse, because it's just about putting them on the altar. So I have some nuts, just happen to have some nuts by, so we're going to smother it in nuts as well. And the final touch with any Roman cake, any Roman recipe in fact, is a little bit of pepper, because pepper makes all the difference, especially with honey, and especially when it is freshly ground. There's a little bit of cheese here that's smoking on the fire and getting in my eyes, so I'm going to move it to the other side of the hob so that I don't get covered in smoke. Okay, so we're going to grind some pepper, because every Roman dish and every dessert was smothered in pepper, well, not smothered, but sprinkled in pepper before it went out into the dining room, and particularly so with something with honey. They go together exceptionally well. So I'm just going to grind this into coarse So there's lots of stories about desserts being served in the dining room like this, and they're being very hot, and the diners can't get near them because they're too hot to touch. And it rather implies that this kind of oven was something that was used at the very last minute as a sort of a piece de resistance. At the end of a meal, you produce a hot, fresh Libum. So there we are. Cato's Libum, but as a dinner sweet. So shall we try? Once you leave it with the honey on for a long time, it sucks into the dough. It becomes very tasty. The outer shell is crisp and glorious, and the inside it's unctuous with the honey and the cheese. It's beautiful. And the pepper, beautiful. Rod, you must have some too.
I must.
Yes. Let me pass you one.
Thank you. That's very unusual.
Any bit that's had the bay leaf underneath it is really good.
It's a definite cake though, isn't it?
It's a definite cake. If you make it with ricotta, it tends to have more height, but I like it with the high fat, which is the more important thing. And of course also goat's cheese rather than milk, rather than cow's milk, but it's having access to fresh goat's milk that's the issue. Beautiful. Lots of other cakes in Cato, very complex cakes in Cato, using interlayered pastry with cheese and honey, making balls of pastry stuffed with cheese and honey. Very complicated. I've had a go at many of them, and we will try one. We will try them all, I think, eventually. but we'll take it slowly. But for now, enjoy. Thank you very much for watching.